Hello there and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey into men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now on the channel I often feature reviews of wristwatches. It could be argued that I've featured more expensive watches than cheap, typically Rolex, Tudor, my personal sort of collection. But I've also reviewed watches in the past which have been functional, utilitarian, very practical. Today definitely falls into that category. The watch we're going to look at today is perhaps the antithesis of the luxury watch. It is the functional, everyday watch, the workaday watch, which is, let's be frank, affordable by anybody. Now, on the day that I purchased this watch, and this was the reason why I purchased it, it was the cheapest watch which was available on Amazon in the UK. And it cost £7.99 delivered, all right, shipping included. You know, that is not expensive. The watch we're talking about is the Casio MQ24-7BLL. An uninspiring name indeed, but a very practical watch. So let's have a look and take it out of the box. Okay folks, here is the star of the show, as it appears in the mail from Amazon. So what do we get? We get a very simple plastic container with our watch visible inside. Let's get that out of there, see what we're working with. Let's have a look what we're getting for our £7.99. So, hang on, what's at the back here? Oh, here's a rather thick instructional booklet, which goes with our Casio, and there's the watch itself, nothing else in the box. Watch and the simple hang tag. A little bit of information, barcode on there. Oh, there's a plastic cover that's just come off the dial. And there is our Casio MQ24-7BLL. And let's just get this in some sort of reasonable situation so we can have a proper look at it. So there it is. Now, as you can see, very simple and straightforward. White dial, Arabic numerals between 1 and 12. Easy to read, that is fair to say. Those black numerals on the white dial, classic. One might say, you know, really quite attractive. It's time only. There's no other complication, no date, no day showing, just a hand for the hours, minutes and the seconds. Simple, utilitarian. Exactly what you need, you get what you expect. Now it's got a black resin case. Yeah, it feels quite flimsy, but that said, you know, it feels as if it's made to last. You know, it's not cheap crap. This does feel fairly decent in quality. It is fair to say that. Not doing it down. And yeah, it looks fairly good. The buckle, resin, signed with Casio, as you can see. So it's a pin buckle made of resin, harder resin than the actual bracelet. Quite straightforward. Plenty of holes on there. We'll try the watch on in a moment. We'll see what it looks like on the wrist. It's a 35mm case, as you can see, which as they describe as being unisex in nature. But we'll talk about that in a moment. It's only 8mm thick, indeed, only 8mm thick, which is quite slim, really. And as you can see, the case back, stainless steel, just saying Casio, MQ24, water resistant, Japan movement, cased in China, it says on the back. I'm reading that, probably you can't see that because I'm having to tilt it somewhat to see it, but that's what it says on the back. So quite simple. I imagine that stainless steel casing there is what gives us that water resistance. So not too bad. The quartz movement inside is a 1330 module, which will have a 3-year battery in it. So it gives us plenty of time with that battery. And let's be honest, for a watch of this value, one battery lasting 3 years, would you really be changing that battery, or will you just be buying another watch? You know, depends how deeply you are committed to the circular economy. Now that module inside, the 1330, is a Japanese made module, but it has been cased inside the watch in a factory in China. And it's said to have a plus minus of 20 seconds a month. So as one would expect with a quartz movement, highly accurate, highly reliable. Not much problem there. And with that water resistance, gives you an element of confidence that, you know, this watch can see you through life. It can do whatever you need it to do when you need it to do it. You don't need to be afraid to take this watch with you wherever you want to go. It's simple. It's rather basic, one might say, but I think there is an elegance in its simplicity. Right, so here's our Casio. Bit of a comparison here. And we're going to put it up alongside the largest watch which I have in my personal collection, which is a Tudor Black Bay GMT, as you can see. Now, our little Casio MQ24, as I say, 35mm case size. Our Tudor, 41mm case size. By no means is the Tudor a huge watch. You'll find many watches 42, 43 and bigger in size. But it's interesting to see the comparison, particularly when you look at the thickness of these two pieces side by side. Let me lay them on top of each other for you there so you can have a good look. So the Tudor is stated thickness is 14.6mm, and that Casio is 8mm thick. So yeah, you can really see now how they're going to wear differently on the wrist. If you are a lover of the larger piece, you know, the Tudor is perhaps something that you may be drawn towards. However, if you like watches which disappear on the wrist, that you're not going to notice when they're on your wrist, the Casio, upside down as it is, might well be the watch for you. You know, it is just in a different league. Understandably, you know, we're talking about very different pieces, but I thought I'd throw these two together for you just to give you a little comparison, because it's interesting to see how they look side by side. So here is that watch on my wrist, and yeah, it's an interesting piece, that's for sure. But before we talk about the watch, let's talk about its origin story, which for this piece is the origin of Casio, a Japanese brand which is synonymous with modestly priced electronics and, you know, a number of other things as well. But it started its life in Japan, in Tokyo, in 1946. So post-war Japan, obviously Japan had been utterly devastated as a consequence of its involvement as one of the Axis powers during the Second World War. And as a defeated nation, you know, many of the people were impoverished. But when a nation is at its lowest, there are opportunities for entrepreneurs. And a chap, and I'm going to try and read his name here, Casio Saisakujo, started what became known as Casio in 1946 as initially quite a traditional engineering company. And the first product they made, interestingly enough, was a strange pipe smoker, a ring thing, which you place over your finger. You could place a cigarette in it, and it allowed the wearer to smoke the cigarette right down to the nub, because clearly Japan, impoverished, people wanted to get every single draw they could out of their cigarettes, and this allowed people to do it. Now this first product was successful, and it allowed Casio as an engineering company to expand and go on to greater things. It was quite an innovator in the world of electronics. For instance, it produced the first electronic calculator available in the world. So, you know, it was quite innovative, at the forefront of developments. As time went on, Casio, you know, in our minds, as it is today, as it has been for many years, it makes things like electronic goods. It still makes many calculators. I'm sure I did my examinations in school using a Casio calculator, if I remember correctly, and my son will do so in the modern era. So it's been at the forefront there. Musical instruments, for instance, you know, synthesizers, keyboards, very much Casio has been there. And of course, very much wristwatches as well. Now, Casio watches have long since garnered a reputation of practical functionality. And if I could use an analogy, they're kind of the AK-47 of the watch world. But it's more than that. They don't just make, you know, really functional watches. Their range is quite extensive. You know, they're responsible for bringing the highly popular, highly practical G-Shock watches into existence, and its many, many derivatives. They do an edifice range, which is quite dressy, quite classical, extremely modestly priced, but actually, if you're thinking about buying a watch which you want to wear with a suit and you have very little money, the edifice watch is, you know, a really good one to look at. And of course, their world famous F91W wristwatch. Extremely functional, practical and inexpensive. It is by numbers the most worn watch in the world, because we know Casio produces something to the tune of 3 million units of the F91W per year, which would make it by far, you know, the most common watch in the world. To such an extent that, you know, its reputation has suffered, because we know it is used by terrorists as a component in the timing mechanisms of many of its bombs. So its association, by being so readily available and so inexpensive, you know, stems all elements of the watch wearing world. So what about this little Casio MQ24-7BLL? What's it like? Well, you've seen it close up. It is a small watch, okay? But it's worth talking about that for a moment, because Casio describes this piece as being unisex, and it's 35 millimeters. So 35 millimeters, it sounds small. It sounds small in the modern era, when many men are wearing watches like this Tudor, which is 41 millimeters. You know, Rolex, for instance, seem to keep increasing their watches. Their very popular Submariner range, they've taken it up from 40 millimeters to 41. So it suggests that larger watches are in vogue for men, and that's been the case for many years. You know, we've seen men's watches getting bigger. Slight little quirk there with Rolex making their Explorer range smaller, going from 39 to 36 millimeters. But that's an interesting point. It shows that the classic size of men's watches has always been closer to the mid 30 millimeters than the much larger 40 plus. If we were to look back at the classic men's watches, maybe of the golden era of men's style, you know, the 40s, 50s, 60s, it would have been very common to see men wearing 34 millimeter, 35, 36 millimeter wristwatches. I mean, until only very recently, Rolex still carried a 34 millimeter Oyster Perpetual watch in their range. One of their flag carrier watches is the Rolex Datejust, available in a 36 millimeter size. Now, I own one of those, and I've got some pictures here to show you what this little Casio MQ24 looks like alongside that 36 millimeter Rolex Datejust. And I think you can see, you know, it doesn't look totally dwarfed by it. So the classic men's wristwatch size, this watch in that sort of division isn't tiny. 35 millimeters is not tiny. Now, I'm a modestly proportioned man. You know, I'm just over 5'9" in height. I'm of medium stature. My wrists are proportional to my body size, so I have a 6.5 inch wrist. I have to say, whilst this little Casio doesn't look large by any means on my wrist, it doesn't look tiny either. I personally wouldn't have any problems wearing this little Casio. And because of its quite clean dial, white dial, very little text on that dial, just 3 lines of text, Casio, quartz and water resistant is all it says. Those black numbers makes the watch look easy to read, and it makes it look a little larger than it actually is. Very simplistic black resin case, and the strap, again, it's not fancy, it's not complicated, so it makes the watch stand out and look quite proportional. So don't automatically shy away from a watch just because of its size. Have a look at it, see how it wears. In this case, the watch is, yes, it's 35 millimeters. It's not big, but it can be proportional depending on how you wear it, the size of your wrist. It's light, there's no doubt about that. You know, I think it's 20 grams. So you really, you know, you don't know it's there. It is invisible on your wrist when it comes to its weight. It's certainly not going to cause you a problem. And because of its low profile, only being 8mm, it'll slide under any dress cuff on any shirt or anything you're wearing. Now this is an ideal watch if you want to wear a watch and you're going into a situation perhaps where you're worried about damage being caused to your watch, you're worried about it being getting wet, or in any situation where you're concerned that you wouldn't want to wear a more expensive watch. This might be a very perfect stunt watch if you don't like wearing watches like that more infamous, the Casio F91W. Yes, that can be found, it's a little bit, I think it might be more expensive, but it's a digital watch. It's a square box on your wrist. There's little style involved with that. With this little fella, it's stylish. Yeah, it's true. It is a classic analog watch which looks good with those nice 3 hands. Now the watch is quite simple, there's no doubt about that, and it lacks some things like it doesn't have any luminescence on the dial, so it's not going to be visible at night. But that said, its easy to read dial makes up for that. You only need a little bit of light when you've got a black hands on a white dial. It's easy to see, no doubt about that. But where this watch comes into its own really is if you subscribe to the minimalist mindset. If you like that Scandinavian chic where you just get exactly what you need and no more, this is where this little piece comes into its own. I've used the word utilitarian more than once in this review, and that's exactly the word that keeps coming back to my mind when I think about this little Casio MQ24. It is just simple, and it gets the job done. It does what a watch is made to do. It tells you the time and no more, in minutes, hours, and seconds. Okay, now no watch is perfect, and this one is certainly not. Let's look at its pros and cons. I've made a few notes. I looked down. What's its pros? Well, its value is its pro. On the day that I bought this watch, it was the cheapest watch available on Amazon UK. Now you might find it different now if you look on there, it changes every day. But for £7.99, I was really shocked at what turned up in the post. So its value proposition is superb. I mean, for me, absolutely all day long, I would rather have one of these than its more popular and more famous older brother, the F91W. It's also available in the Casio range. Quartz movement doesn't offer much more. It tells you the time, simple as that. But this does it, but with a little bit more class. What else is its pro? Well, it's a delight to wear. You don't even notice it on the wrist. I mean, all day long, as it happens today, I've been wearing this Tudor Black Bay GMT. Now this is a chunk. It's a big old watch. It's a unit. It's thick, nearly 15mm. It's heavy. It's automatic. That's true. It does more. Of course, it does have that GMT feature. It does give you the date. But it's a heck of a watch, a big watch. This piece, when you're wearing this, disappears. You don't even know it's there. That's definitely a pro. If you get wrist fatigue, wearing a big lump of steel on your wrist all day. It's very easy to read. Definitely a pro with this piece as well. You look down, that white dial, black digits, black hands, you can see it straight away. I mean, I own much more expensive watches which have got complicated dials which are much harder to read than this piece. I'm not concerned by that at all. Its accuracy, its longevity are certainly in its favour. It's a quartz watch, plus minus 20 seconds a month. Now, this Tudor can only dream of performance of that nature. So, that's something you've got to consider as well. It's very accurate, as is the nature of a quartz watch. And it's minimalist. And I really like that. I don't like clutter. I don't like extraneous crap on the dial. Lines and lines of text, elaborate date windows, things like that. This is very simple. If you like that sort of Bauhaus style, you've got it. But no watch is perfect. And this has its cons as well. Not so many though, not so many as you would think. Firstly, its biggest con, and it's what's putting you off right now when you're watching this review, is the first thing I said, 35mm. It is small in the modern era. But if you want a watch which is practical, sensible, 35mm is absolutely fine. It'll disappear on your wrist. I mean, it's eminently ideal if you've got a young child, perhaps a young man growing into adulthood, and you want to get him a nice watch, an analog watch. You know, if you don't want to go down that digital route, the analog piece, and this will certainly engender some interest in the beauty of simplistic time telling. So yeah, no problem with that. And it's described as a unisex piece. It's ideal for a lady, perhaps, who likes a watch of this nature. So whilst as chaps can still wear it, so can a lady. Another negative is its lack of luminescence. Although I would say it's not such a problem. Because this piece is so easily visible and easy to read, I'm not bothered by the lack of lume. So, you know, you'll have to weigh that up. Do you really look at your watch in low light conditions that often where luminescence is important to you? If the answer is yes, this lacks it, so bear that in mind. So in summary, how would I weigh up this little Casio MQ24? The cheapest watch on Amazon, £7.99 when I bought it. Well, to be honest, there is not much to dislike with this piece. Its price is great, and to be, you know, the simplicity is intoxicating. If you've been around fancy watches and you then put on a watch which is light, it feels nimble, it feels capable, you know, I wouldn't hesitate to perhaps even jump in the pool with this because I've got no worries with it. There's no concerns. If it goes wrong, it's $7.99. It's 2 cups of coffee in Starbucks. That's all you've got on your wrist here. There's no gamble. So that part of it is really alluring, I think. A sort of worry-free wristwatch which does its job adequately in practically every situation you can think of. So why not have a look at it? Give it a look. I'll put a link to where I bought this watch in the show notes below. And yeah, I'm quite happy with this one, and I will wear it from time to time. So it's been an interesting journey to find out more about the cheapest watch on Amazon. Well, if you enjoyed this video today, please do me a favour, give us a thumbs up, and if you're not already a member of our Chaps Guide community, click that red button. Come on the journey with me. So, chaps, until the next time we meet, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again very soon.